Hello there my lovely jewelry makers, I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this cute and elegant wirework flower ring. So we have a Rose Montee in the center that's kind of the main feature of the flower, and then some wirework petals around it framing it and of course turning it into a flower. Now if you want to support me in any way, you can of course always like, share and subscribe. And there's also a super thanks button below the video. I do also have a shop where I sell both jewelry kits and tutorials. So you can always check that out. There will be a link in the description box down below. Otherwise, if you want to learn how to make this ring, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now I'm using a regular round silver coated copper wire, and the first gauge here is a 0.6mm, and this will be our base wire. And for the weaving wire I'm using this 0.25mm. So it's a very fine wire, and I'm using that for a couple of reasons. One, I like the look that it's going to give of a really fine and detailed weave. And also the base wire that we're using is on the thinner side, so you don't want the weaving wire to be too thick, because that could make it more likely it's going to distort the base wire. But you could easily use a different size weaving wire if you prefer. And then finally I'm using this 6mm Rose Montee, and that's going to be the center of our flower, and create a really nice sparkle, and in this case color as well. So if I just flip it over, you can actually then see where the holes are. So we technically have 4 holes there, and they go along the back there in a cross. And that's what we're going to take advantage of to make the flower. As for the tools, we of course need some flush cutters first of all, so we can cut our wire, some tweezers and nose pliers to help manipulate the wire, and then of course a ring mandrel to help get the right size and shape. Now we also need some sort of mandrel to help shape the petals of the flower, and these are just a few examples of things you could use. So first of all, here I have some 6-step bail making pliers, and I would use the largest step on that because we need a mandrel of about 8 to 9mm or so. And equally here I have a different kind of mandrel where you also have different steps, but it's not a pair of pliers. And finally, this is another example of a mandrel. But of course you can equally use any household items that has the right size and shape as well. So let's get it all ready and let's get started. So we then need to cut some lengths of our wire, and first of all I have a length of a 0.6mm here of about 70cm, and like I said, this will be our base wire. So to weave our ring band we're going to use a length of a 0.25mm of about 2 meters. And for each petal we need a length of about 70cm of the 0.25mm, and of course in total we need 4 of these. So the first thing we need to do is grab our length of base wire and then also our Rose Montee, and we basically need to create the flower first of all. So just get to one end of your wire, and then you want to go through one of the holes straight across like this in the Rose Montee, and then you just want to bring this down, and we want to go a bit past the middle. So don't start right in the middle, but we want to leave enough length on one end that we can then use that to make the ring band. But then we want to get straight into making our flower. So this is where I'm going to bring in my case here, my pliers. You can use whatever mandrel you're using. So I have them handy, and I'm just going to start out by getting the wire through so we can start tightening around the pliers. So I'll go to the end that we're going to be working with here. And then we need to go through the Rose Montee again, but through the other hole that goes straight across. Just kind of maneuver your wire inside there, because now inside the wires are actually crossing each other. So push that through like that. You can see we have them going through the bead there in a cross now inside. And then as you can see, when we're bringing this further and further in, we end up getting this loop, which is going to end up creating one of the petals. And it's going to be when I get it almost all the way tight down here. Now I'm going to bring in my pliers, and basically we're just going to use the pliers to help shape the petal. So you basically just want to keep tightening the wire, so keep pulling it, but now the pliers here, or mandrel, whatever you're using, is going to act as a stopper and basically make sure the wire doesn't pull tight all the way down around the bead. And then as you can see, that then also gives us the petal shape. So that is the first one, and basically we're just going to keep repeating this. So I like to just make sure to smooth out my wire here as I go. Now we have this in place, so the wire that we're working with is coming out in that direction there. So I'm then just going to make the next petal on this corner right next to the first one. So that means we need to go through this hole that we went through first of all in the same direction here. So you can then see this end of the wire is ending up coming out in the same direction as the other end. And then you just want to hold on to the first petal that we made while pulling this tighter. until we get it small enough that we can easily use our pliers. So again, place them inside of the petal while you then keep pulling on that wire, and it shapes around that step, and we have our second petal. And you can see we've gotten halfway through shaping the flower, and just try and make sure we don't misshape the ones we've already made. Now continuing, grab the end again of the wire. Now we need to go through the hole on this side. So you can see we're going through all the holes multiple times, and what you want to do is just kind of maneuver the end of the wire inside of the bead to just try and find a gap where the wire will fit through, because obviously the more times we go through, the tighter it will get in there, but it is possible. So just push that through. Again, pull it so the loop gets smaller and smaller until we then use our pliers or mandrel and pull it tight and get that nice consistent petal shape. That's now the exact same size as the rest of them. And we now have 3 petals, and we need to do the last one. And in this case, we need to do the corner down here, and you just want to have a look at where your wires are coming out from that hole there. Now of course this will be the most difficult one because you have all these wires running through already, so this will be the tightest one to get through. But like I said, it is possible. You just kind of want to find the space inside the bead to maneuver your wire through. You can see it's coming out on the other side, but you can also see I'm struggling more to get it through. So there's definitely not really much space left in there, but just enough to get the wire through one last time. And that is also the reason really why we're using this gauge wire in the first place. Because if you use a thicker gauge wire for the base wire, you wouldn't be able to get it through this amount of times. Now get the pliers, and then just keep pulling it until we get the final petal shape. So something a bit like that. Now what I like to do before we start weaving the petals here is just to kind of secure them in place. So on the back, I'm just going to grab the ends of the wire and just bend them towards the back here, just so they're going to not move around to prevent anything from losing its shape. And of course you can then kind of bring them to whatever direction to make it easier to weave. So I have it in this position. I might as well just start with this petal here. That's the easiest to get to. So you want to grab one of your lengths of weaving wire that's meant for the petals, and then we want to start filling in the petal with the weaving wire by using the figure of 8 weave. So I'm just going to take the end of the weaving wire, place it behind that petal there, and then you go around one side first of all, and you push it all the way down towards the bead. So I'm going down through the petal itself and pushing my wraps all the way down, and I'm going around again on the same side here, so 2 times. Make sure we don't get any kinks or anything. Just undo any possible kinks forming before they form, so we avoid them. And then just going to use my pliers to help push it all the way down. Now what I'm going to do is take my length of wire, bring it underneath to the other side of that same petal. Again, push it all the way down, get to the end, and again just go down through the middle. But now we're just wrapping on the other side of the petal. And again we're doing that twice. So come down through again, make sure we don't get any kinks. And again, just push your wraps as far down as they'll go. And that's 2 wraps on that other side. Come back to the first side and do another 2 wraps. And that is the figure of 8 weave, and we'll basically just use that to cross back and forth from side to side to fill in this shape that obviously then ends up forming the petal. So now I kept weaving here, you can see I've gotten further up the petal, and what I just want to mention is that it starts getting a bit more difficult to do your weaving, because once you get to the widest part of the petal and you start weaving towards the narrow point, you'll find that your wire will want to naturally slip towards that narrow point. So that will obviously cause a lot of gaps in your weave. Now, to get as tight a weave as possible, what you want to do is obviously counteract that kind of slippage there. So now every time I'm going to make a wrap, the previous wrap that I made was on this bottom side here, so what I'm going to do is hold that down, so push that nice and tight with the other wraps, and then I do my new wrap on the other side, and then as I'm tightening that, keep pushing the previous wrap down, and then also of course push the new wrap down nice and tight there, and just repeat to get that second wrap come through the petal. And then just keep pushing both sides down. And now I've done my wraps on the top side, so I'm going to push that down as I'm going to the bottom side here, and then doing my wraps on that side. And then of course push this new side down as I'm doing these new wraps, to try and ensure that your weave stays tight throughout the whole petal. So do the second one and make sure to push them nice and tight. So you just want to keep wrapping like this until you don't really have any more space left to wrap back and forth. So now you can see the petals pretty much filled in completely. I don't have any more space to go back and forth. What we do have left though is a little bit of the base wire kind of peeking through. So what I'm just going to do is wherever I ended up, whatever side, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to then cover up that base wire that we can still see by just wrapping the weaving wire here around it from the side where you ended up all the way over to the other side, and kind of just cover that base wire so it blends in nicely with the rest of the weave. So just coil all the way from one side to the other, and once you filled it in, we can just kind of do the final wrap without going through the petal, and just cut off the excess here. Just going to be a short little tail left that you then want to make sure to just tuck away with your pliers. So I like to just kind of push it down and then roll it in the direction the wrapper's going. So that's going to tuck it kind of inside of the petal there, within and in between the wraps you've been doing. So just make sure you feel it with your fingers so you can't feel the end of the wire. You can also just go and cut off the initial little tail that we left. But otherwise, what you then want to do is go around on each petal and fill them in the exact same way. So now that I've filled in all the petals here, you can see we have the flower ready. Now what I'm going to do is just flip it to the back, and you can just fix up your base wires here. So what I want to do is actually bend them across the back and have them cross over each other. We can also just straighten out the wires a little bit if they've gotten a little bit misshapen when we were working with the petals. And then they basically just lay there right next to each other. So what we're going to do now is shape the ring band, and for that I'm going to get out my ring mandrel. Of course you want to decide what size and just go ever so slightly larger, because we are going to be weaving around the ring band. Then we need to shape this around. So I'm just going to lay the back there against my ring mandrel, and then I'm going to bring my wires here around all the way and have it come back out to the same side that it's coming from, and just keep smoothing it out. And I'm going to do it twice with each of the wires. So this length has now gone around the ring mandrel twice. I'm just going to swap hands and do the same thing with the other one. So there's obviously coming in the direction, but just bring it around once and then twice. And then we have 4 wraps with our base wire around the ring mandrel here. Now you might find that it's going to be quite springy and the wires aren't really going to want to stay where you put them, and therefore keep the right size. Don't worry too much about that, just make sure it's roughly the size that you want it to have. So we then need to get our weaving wire for the ring band ready. So I have that here, and I can then remove my ring from the ring mandrel, and then just gently hold on to your wires here. As you can see, it does move around still, but we can still fix things. So what we're going to do is start our weave for our ring band. Now I'm going to be using the diagonal wire weave, and I'm just going to then put the end of the weaving wire here through the ring band, and then just have a little tail coming out on the other side. And I'm just going to start working here where it's a bit more open, so you don't have to start working all the way up here underneath the flower. But what we're first going to do is just first of all attach it. So I'm just wrapping it around the bottom wire. So we just basically have 4 base wires here to work with, and then just pull the wire all the way through, and then just pull that nice and tight so it's attached now. And then I'm going to go over the top of the bottom 2 base wires, so that means come down right in the middle there, and still then bringing it out through the ring band, and then just tighten that. Now what you can always do is use your pliers to help squeeze and push your wraps nice and tight together, especially right here in the beginning, because obviously the base wires are still kind of loose and moving around. Now what we're going to do is come up between the 2 wires that we just wrapped over the top of, like that, and then push down, go over the top of the next 2 base wires, that means come down between the top 2, bring it all the way through, tighten that up, come up between the 2 we just wrapped over the top of, so out through right in the middle of the wires, and then over the top of the last 2, pull the wire through, and again then just out between the 2 that we just wrapped over the top of. So we can just wrap around the top one by itself, just like we wrapped around the bottom one by itself, and then pull it all the way through again to come down behind all of them. And this is the first round of our weave, and we've also now, you could say, attached them all together, so it's a bit more easy to work with. But what we need to do now is just basically keep repeating this. So we need to go around the bottom one by itself, pull it all the way through, make sure it's nice and tight, come down in the middle, so we go over the top of the bottom 2, up between those same 2, so we can wrap over the next 2, so that's the 2 middle, and then pull it all the way through, come up between those same 2 to wrap over the last 2, and then once again up between those 2 that we just wrapped over the top of, so we can wrap around the top one by itself, and then pull down through to come down behind all of them again. And then just make sure your wraps are nice and tight together. And this is how I'm going to be building my ring band, just going all the way from one side to the rest. Now, like I said, obviously we're starting here in the middle, so I'm going to weave a little section and then we're going to push it down, because it is a little bit hard to just work in there, especially with the loose wires and that when we started out. But like I said, this is the diagonal wire weave. This is what I'm going to be using. You can easily use a different wire weave that uses 4 base wires. I do have loads of wire weave tutorials on my channel, so feel free to check that out, including a more detailed tutorial for this specific one. It's all in the same playlist. Otherwise, just keep going like this. So now I have a little section done there. We can also start to push it down, like I said. And if you weave tight, it can be a little bit difficult to push the weave down the base wires. I personally tend to weave on the tighter side, so it can be a bit rough. But what I like to do then is actually kind of do it one or a couple of rows at a time. So just start from the bottom end here that we want to push further down, and then just do a bit at a time, kind of separate the weave out, and then you'll gradually move it down, and then we'll kind of collect it back up with the other end of the weave, as you can see there. So you kind of just gradually do it a bit at a time, and then obviously as you move it a bit you can weave a bit more, and then you can move it again, weave a bit more. Now what I also suggest that you do is, before you get too much further, is just double check the size of this, because again, if you do weave tight like I do, at one point you won't really be able to move the weave on the base wires anymore. So therefore you just want to make sure you have the right size. So put it back on your ring mandrel and place it on the size you want it to be. And then what you just want to do is basically these lengths of the base wire, you just want to pull on them, so that if it's gotten a bit too big, you can then just pull it tight while there's still movement, and then you'll be more sure that it's going to keep its shape and size as well. And then otherwise you just want to keep weaving until you have the whole ring band weaved. Get it pushed as far down as you can get it, and then finish weaving until as far in as you can get it on the other side. So I've now weaved all the way around the ring band here. You can see my weave goes all the way along. And then before we cut off the ends and get rid of them, we just want to make sure that we've wrapped around a single base wire a few times before we cut it off, because it's going to make it more secure. So what we just want to do now is get rid of it because we're done using it. So I'm just going to cut it off where it's finished. And then the little tail you're going to have left that you can feel if you put your finger on it, we just want to make sure to tuck that out of the way. And always just double check that you can't feel it, because you don't want it to catch or scratch on your skin while wearing it, of course. And we can also just get rid of the other little end that we left in the beginning in the same way. And what we then have left are these ends of our base wire here. So all I'm going to do with them is basically start to wrap them around in the middle where the flower is connected to the ring band. So just get the wire in between the flower and the ring band there, and kind of get them both to go around at the same time. And this will give it a little bit more stability, but also, of course, we want to get rid of these wires but have them tucked away at the same time, nicely and securely. So I'm just going to wrap it around a couple of times until you feel like it's as secure as you want it to be. And then to actually get rid of the ends, what I'm going to do is just where I feel there's a bit of space in between the ring band and the flower, I'm going to cut off the excess here, make sure I leave just a little end that we can then use our pliers to just grab that very end there, and I'm going to bend it inwards kind of towards the ring band, and then we want to just tuck it in further as far as it'll go. And that just makes sure that the end of the wire is going to get tucked away. And again, obviously, not catch or scratch on us while we're wearing it. And then you just want to do the same with the other. So just find somewhere suitable to be able to finish it off. Just going to wrap it around to around here, I think. So cut it off just like the other one. You can see I've left a short tail, so that I can just grab onto that with my pliers, bend it in towards the ring band first of all, and then squeeze it and tuck the end out of the way. So now we got rid of the base wires as well. And then we basically have the ring done and ready. Now what you can do is adjust this. So right now it's sitting, so the ring band is coming in between the petals. You could also adjust it so it sits in the opposite way like that, so the ring band is coming out underneath two of the petals there. It's completely up to you and the look that you want it to have. So you can choose to leave it like this so the petals are nice and flat. It's really cute still. You could also choose to give a bit of life to it. So what that would be is, for instance, one petal at a time. I'm just going to keep hold of everything. I'm going to go kind of towards the outside of the petal, and just with my hands and fingers, just gently bend it upwards a little bit, just on the outer end. And you could go around and do that with all of them. And that just gives it a little bit of a different look. Obviously a little bit more 3D. So a little bit more of a cup shape where we have a coloured stone and sparkle right there in the middle. So that's completely up to you and the look that you prefer. But of course you have both options there. Otherwise, then that's your ring done and ready to wear. So I really hope you enjoyed the tutorial for this cute and elegant wirework flower ring, where we really have the Rose Montee featured in the center of the flower, surrounded by the petals. And it's both elegant but gives quite an impact at the same time. Now if you want to check out more tutorials, I have loads of my channels within many different mediums, so feel free to check that out. And of course, while you're there, you can always like, share and subscribe. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one. But what we're just going to do is, first of all,